When you think of game development, what are the most important parts of the game for you? Tell me your answers in the comments, but let me throw some out there. Is it your narrative? Do you need a Disco Elysium level narrative filled with extremely philosophical and political concepts, to an almost confusing degree with a cast of characters written to challenge your more than unethical actions throughout the game? Or do you need a Last of Us, a game filled to the brim with character writing and progression that tells a beautiful tale of a father and what's his surrogate daughter fighting to survive in a brutal, broken world? Not narrative? Then maybe gameplay will be your most important. Is it fluid and fun like a Dishonored or Deathloop, being able to quickly move and kill even quicker with a variety of insane powers in the palm of your hand? Or how about a more slow turn-based JRPG like that of Persona 5, that takes its time in allowing you to use the right persona for the right situations? Now both of those are incredibly important to a game's development and the overall final product. I mean, it'd be pretty noticeable that either of those were bad. It instantly springs to the front of your mind, but I bet you can't guess what I think the most important is. My most important feature is the UI of a game. These are integral to my personal experience, and I find it to be the most underutilized but also most underappreciated part of a game and its development. I mean, for God's sake, according to the UI designer on The Last of Us, arguably one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time, it didn't even have an overall design for its HUD 8 months before launch. And as much as I adore the game, the HUD is the place where it falls the weakest, and I'm saddened that The Last of Us Part 2 kept to that same design. It's way too simplistic, and with a broken and rough world such as The Last of Us, there was a lot of potential for a HUD that fit the world and tone of the game. When you compare a HUD like that to something as tonally and artistically pleasing as Hollow Knight's simplistic but informative HUD, you can see how much of a difference it can make just subconsciously to you. It's just entirely more pleasing. The HUD, and whether it fits aesthetically, tonally, or even if it looks good enough to show, is an extremely crucial part when creating not only a HUD but an entire UI. Imagine if a game like Persona 5 did not have the HUD that it does. It would not be the same game. The way Joker and the different Phantom Thieves jump from menu to menu like true tricksters is just incredibly pleasing to the eye. Not only that, but the fact that the colour scheme matches the red and black noir style the Phantom Thieves is iconic for is also just incredibly well done. It just pops with style, and that includes the HUD during battles. Not only is choosing what action incredibly poppy, but each symbol for an attack type plus the menu to view enemies' weaknesses pop with distinct and usually colliding colours. Again, going back, compare this to The Last of Us UI, and while I don't particularly see an entryway for any type of style to come through as strong as Persona's, I do see room for an aesthetically and more natural design. Perhaps have the borders be more cracked and decrepit, or have guns have way more detailed designs. And while I am nagging on The Last of Us for quite a lot, its simplistic HUD leaves room for it to do another important thing HUDs are essential for, and that is relaying information to the player. The health bar in The Last of Us, while small to fit the more minimalistic nature, is bright compared to the design and colour palette of levels, so when in a firefight you will definitely notice your health decreasing or being low, especially when it goes to the red. The Last of Us 2 steps down with this, as the health bar and overall minimalistic style goes for a bright white colour palette, which can vary in visibility. However, I found the interchanging colours in the first entry, specifically on health, to be way more helpful. And honestly, it's not difficult to mess up a basic HUD. A game I would use as an example is Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales. Both share the same basic HUD formula of a health bar with your fillable bars for focus or venom respectively underneath it, with dynamic spots coming in every now and then. But you wanna know what is worse than a really simple HUD? It's a really bad HUD that has to be dynamic. I cannot stress this enough, HUDs make games way more immersive. Not more cinematic, more immersive. And very rarely are there times where I find a fully dynamic HUD to be better. If The Witcher 3 had a completely dynamic HUD, it would look like ass. Roaming through the world as a Witcher, I want to feel like I'm multitasking all these things. Looking at the minimap to see a route, looking at all my objectives to decide on which one to do, along with looking at the world. If there was nothing on screen but just the city, I'd be bored as hell, and I don't think most people realise that. They don't understand how HUDs play into your attention span and keeping you in tune with the game. The balance of finding a HUD that keeps attention but also one that isn't cluttered is a difficult one, and one I find does this badly is Cyberpunk 2077. This is the perfect example of a cluttered HUD. The amount of shit on screen, especially when getting a call, is horrible to look at, and while it matches the cyberpunk aesthetic, I think a more Skyrim style dynamic HUD would have worked best, as it just feels way too claustrophobic. It tries to be a little bit too similar to The Witcher, however the reason that isn't as closed in or claustrophobic is due to you being in third person. You're away from Geralt and you have room to breathe. However, with Cyberpunk you feel almost as if you can't. Taking it back to Hollow Knight, it is a genius in cleanliness and keeping attention with its HUD, and not only because you're required to be on your feet at all times, but because of the fluidity and movement of the menu. While when you kill enemies and your soul flask fills up, you may not have an adverse and physical reaction, but subconsciously your brain is getting that little itch scratched of it being so fluid and animated. Same goes toward healing yourself and the masks. There are some HUDs however that just transcend what a HUD should be, artistically, stylistically, and just in general pleasuring to the eye, and that is Dishonored 2 and Disco Elysium. For Disco Elysium, this is the most perfect example of a UI and HUD that fits aesthetically and stylistically to a T. The art style for Kim and Harry with their portraits being put on this dark paint art style that fits the game, with its more paintbrush and paint stroke art style and its own world design. The colour scheme is also very well done, with orange and black being core colours, however with the entire rainbow being saved for the very skill portraits. The dialogue boxes, while placed unusually to make way for the game's camera angle, is almost exactly how I personally pictured the dialogue boxes in tabletop RPGs like D&D, which fits nicely with Disco Elysium's style of gameplay. It's just an extremely perfect HUD. Dishonored 2 on the other hand is great in its supplying of information, along with not straying from the aesthetic the first game built up. However, it's updated to fit a more polished game along with the more brighter setting of Karnaca when compared with the dingy and dreary Dunwall. From the HUD to the menus, everything is blotted with these blue to black watercolour paint blots, and even with this still remains cleaner and more polished than its previous entry. Stylistically it's also way better, as Dishonored 1 really only had the power icons and health/mana bars to bring light to the game's art. Dishonored 2 strives to make everything have style and finesse to it, which is an extremely nice touch. To bring this video to a close, HUDs are important to me, which I think we've established. To have a good HUD or even choose to have no HUD at all takes practice, and a lot of games don't always nail it, or are pushed in the wrong direction. Thankfully HUDs are becoming far more customizable, which is nice, but no matter how interchangeable each aspect is, a HUD will always take great importance when analysing a game's tone, aesthetic, and art style, no matter what game you're playing. Thank you so much for watching this little video essay. The people over on my Twitter voted for this, so if you want to vote on what videos I do in the future, the link to that is in the description. And plus, I've always been itching to make this video purely due to how passionate I am about how overlooked and underutilized HUDs are. And hopefully I've opened your eyes to see their importance and fine details as well. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, and if you'd like to see more from me, make sure to subscribe. Hope to see you in the next video. Have a good one, and goodbye.